beneath the quiet plains of modern Illinois, not far from the roaring Mississippi River, lies the ghost of a forgotten city. Its streets are gone, its temples buried under time, and its people long vanished yet once. This was the largest metropolis north of Mexico. This was Cahokia, a city of mounds, rituals, and mystery. Long before Columbus dreamed of crossing the Atlantic, before European kings heard whispers of the New World, a civilization was already thriving in the heart of North America. Here in the vast floodplains where the rivers met the people of Cahokia, built a society that rivaled the great cities of the ancient world. At its peak, it was alive with voices, farmers, traders, priests, and leaders all working together in a city powered by faith, order, and ambition. But one day the drums fell silent, the fires went cold, the people left, and the city that had once been a symbol of unity turned to dust. This is the story of how Cahokia rose to greatness and how it was lost to time. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Welcome to the Old World Files, history where we uncover hidden stories and explore the mysteries of history like never before. Don't miss out, subscribe now and join our journey through the past. Let's start the story. Long before skyscrapers pierced the sky, before the cities of New York or Chicago ever existed, there was another city, one that rose not from steel and glass, but from earth and faith. The year was around 700 AD. The world was smaller, then quieter. In the lush floodplains near the meeting of the Mississippi, Missouri, and Illinois rivers, a new civilization was awakening. At first, it began with farmers, simple people planting maize and beans along the riverbanks, living in small wooden homes. The land here was kind, its soil dark and rich. Every spring, when the Mississippi spilled over, its banks had left behind new life, fertile silt that turned the fields into gold. The people flourished, villages grew, trade paths formed between distant tribes, exchanging shells, copper, and obsidian. And slowly something greater began to take shape, the spark of an empire. By the turn of the first millennium, this place was alive with ambition. Villages merged into one, and from their shared dreams rose Cahokia, a city destined to become the heart of a continent. It was a city unlike anything the ancient world had seen in North America. Where once there were fields, now there were wide plazas, rows of homes, temples, and towering mounds that touched the sky. At the center of it all stood Mound, a mountain of earth rising nearly 100 feet high, built entirely by human hands. Tens of thousands of workers carried basket after basket of soil, piling it up layer by layer, year after year, until it dominated the landscape. From its summit, a great leader, part king, part priest, could look down upon his city, watching the smoke of 1,000 hearths drift into the morning sky. Cahokia was more than a city, it was a vision. Every road, every mound, every structure was aligned with precision. Some scholars believe it mirrored the stars, others say it followed the sun. What is certain is that the people of Cahokia lived by rhythms far greater than themselves. They tracked the seasons, the solstices, the path of the heavens. Their priests built Woodhenge, a circle of towering wooden posts marking the rising and setting sun at key points. In the year, their own American Stonehenge. Here every sunrise was a ceremony, every sunset a prayer. The people gathered in the plaza to celebrate the turning of the year, to give thanks to the gods of the earth and sky. Smoke rose from sacred fires, drums echoed across the fields, and chants rolled like thunder through the valley. Life in Cahokia pulsed with energy. Artisans shaped tools and ornaments from copper and shell. Traders brought goods from hundreds of miles away, obsidian from the Rocky Mountains, mica from the Appalachians, seashells from the Gulf of Mexico. The city was a crossroads of cultures, ideas, and dreams. But perhaps what made Cahokia truly remarkable was not its size or wealth, but its unity. Thousands of people, farmers, craftsmen, priests, and rulers working together toward a shared purpose. They moved mountains of earth, dug ditches, built temples, and cultivated a city of order and faith. Their world was governed not by conquest but by balance between people, nature, and the gods. And in that balance they found greatness. As the fires burned bright and the mounds grew higher, Cahokia became a symbol of what humanity could achieve when belief and willpower fused together. A city born from the soil, ruled by the heavens and sustained by the river's eternal flow. But just as the Mississippi could bring life, it could also bring destruction. Beneath the glory of Cahokia's rise, invisible forces were already stirring. Forces that would one day test the city's strength and faith to their very limits. For now, though, the world belonged to Cahokia. The mounds stood tall, the drums echoed through the valley, and the people, children of the earth and sky, believed that their city would last forever. By the dawn of the 11th century, Cahokia had become more than a city. It was a heartbeat, pulsing with the rhythm of life, trade, and devotion. The morning sun would rise over the Mississippi floodplain and cast its light across miles of fields, houses, and temples. Smoke curled from the hearths of thousands of homes as families began their day, grinding maize, weaving baskets, shaping clay pots, and preparing food for the bustling city beyond. From above, Cahokia must have looked like an organized maze of life. The great plaza stretched at the city's center, vast enough to hold thousands of people, surrounded by mounds that rose like small mountains. Bunk's Mound dominated them all, the sacred heart of the city. At its summit stood the rulers, temple its fire-burning day and night as a beacon to all who looked upon it. Around it, priests and nobles held council. They spoke of the stars, the seasons, and the fate of their people. The ruler believed to be a bridge between mortals, and gods presided over grand ceremonies, offering prayers and sacrifices to ensure the balance of the world. Every season carried its own ritual, every harvest its own thanksgiving, and in these rituals the people found unity. Cahokia's power was not built through conquest, but through connection. Traders arrived from far-off lands, the Gulf Coast, the Great Lakes, the Appalachian Mountains. They brought copper, obsidian shells, and feathers. In return, they took home maize, pottery, and stories of the grand city of mounds that rose beside the Mississippi. The exchange was not only of goods, but of ideas, spiritual beliefs, art, and language all flowed through. Cahokia, like the river itself, the city was alive with sound, the crackle of fires, the calls of traders, the thump of drums during festivals. Children played in the dirt streets, women tended the gardens that fed their families. Farmers worked in the fields, beyond the city walls, cultivating maize squash and beans, the three sisters that sustained an empire. The cycle of life and labor was endless, yet filled with purpose. Every year when the solstices arrived, the people gathered at Woodhenge, the great wooden circle on the western edge of the city. As dawn broke, the first light of the sun pierced through the posts perfectly, aligned to the temple atop Monk's Mound. It was not mere coincidence, it was calculation, intention, and reverence. The city's very design mirrored the cosmos, as if Cahokia itself was built to reflect the heavens. The people saw their world as sacred. Every action, planting, building, even breathing, was part of a grand order between the earth below and the sky above. Their ruler, the great sun, stood at the center of that order, guiding them through divine wisdom and ritual power. The priests interpreted the movements of the stars, the patterns of the seasons, and the will of unseen forces. They dictated when to sow and when to harvest, when to celebrate and when to mourn. Under their watch, Cahokia flourished. The city expanded outward, with new mounds rising on the horizon. Palisades, wooden walls were built around the central district not only for defense, but as a sacred boundary separating the holy heart of Cahokia from the ordinary world. Within those walls lived the priests, the nobles, and the elite, craftsmen who shaped the symbols of the gods. Festivals brought the people together in vast numbers. The air filled with music and dance, color and smoke. Offerings were made to the spirits of fertility, and harvest food shells and sometimes even blood. For the Cahokians, sacrifice was not cruelty. It was sacred balance and exchange between humanity and the divine. For centuries, the system worked. The city grew stronger, richer, and more organized. The surrounding villages, satellite communities depended on Cahokia for spiritual guidance and political leadership. People looked to the great mounds as a symbol of stability in a world that could often be harsh and unpredictable. From the riverbanks to the plaza, life flowed in harmony, the hum of daily labor, blending with the rhythm of nature. The rains came, the harvests were good, and the city's faith remained unbroken. In the heart of ancient America, Cahokia had become a wonder. A city built not of stone, but of earth and spirit, held together by belief. And yet, like all great civilizations, beneath the surface of harmony, shadows were beginning to stir. The same power that made Cahokia mighty would soon begin to pull it apart. For even in the most ordered worlds, balance is fragile, and in the city of the mounds, cracks were starting to appear in the foundation. The rise of Cahokia was nothing short of miraculous. From a handful of farming villages, it had become the beating heart of ancient North America, a city of order, devotion, and unity. But with great power comes great strain, and beneath the surface of Cahokia's golden age dark, currents had begun to flow. Power, the very thing that had united the city, now began to divide it. The ruler, once seen as divine, became distant from his people. The nobles who surrounded him grew, wealthier their houses, larger their ceremonies, more extravagant. The common people, the farmers and workers who carried the city on, their backs began to feel the weight of their labor. For every basket of earth that built the mounds, for every harvest that fed the priests, they asked, how much longer could this go on? The land too was changing. The forests that had once surrounded the city were being stripped for wood, for homes, for walls, for the endless fires that kept the temples burning. The soil, once rich and forgiving, began to tire under constant planting. The rivers, once the source of life, now carried silt and floodwaters that swept through farmlands without mercy. Nature was turning against the city that had once honored it. And yet the priests told the people to trust. They said the gods demanded more offerings, more sacrifices, more devotion. In the grand plazas, ceremonies became darker, more desperate. The smoke of sacred fires grew thicker, the drums louder, as if to drown out the whisper of doubt spreading through the city. It was during this time that a strange new structure appeared, a massive wooden wall built around the sacred heart of Cahokia. Tall palisades stretching for miles encircled the central mounds and temples. It was said to be for protection, but protection from whom? Some believed the threat came from outside tribes. Others whispered that the wall was to keep unrest from spilling in from within. Beneath the surface, Cahokia was fracturing. The harmony that had once bound its people together was beginning to unravel. Tensions simmered between those inside the walls, the elite, and those outside, the commoners who toiled in the fields. The faith that had united the city was now being tested by hunger, inequality, and fear. In one of the great mounds, a chilling discovery was made, a burial unlike any other. Dozens of young men and women laid to rest, together adorned with shells, beads, and offerings of copper. Some bore marks that suggested sacrifice. To the people of Cahokia, it was a necessary offering, a way to restore balance, to please the gods in troubled times. But to us, looking back through the centuries, it feels like a sign that the city's faith had turned to desperation. Even the stars seemed to shift against Cahokia. The priests who once read the heavens now found their prophecies uncertain. The rains came too soon or not at all. The harvests failed. The gods, it seemed, were no longer listening. And so the city began to change. Markets that once overflowed with goods grew quiet. The plazas where music and laughter once echoed now filled with tension and unrest. Families packed their belongings and left seeking new land, new hope. The city's population began to thin. Still, the rulers tried to maintain control. They ordered new mounds, built new ceremonies, held grander, louder, more elaborate than ever before. But it was no longer enough. The power of faith that had once united Cahokia was slipping through their fingers like sand. There are moments in history when greatness begins to fade, not with war, not with fire, but with silence. In Cahokia, that silence had begun. The people still worked, still prayed, still built, but their hearts no longer beat as one. The once mighty city stood at the peak of its glory, yet the signs of decay were everywhere. In the fields, the soil grew thin. In the temples, the prayers grew hollow. In the eyes of the people, the spark of faith flickered low. Cahokia had reached its turning point. The same forces that had made it magnificent, faith, unity, and ambition, were beginning to tear it apart. And as the sun set behind Monk's Mound, its shadow stretching long across the emptying plaza, one could almost feel it, the slow, inevitable fading of a civilization that had dared to dream too high. The decline of Cahokia did not come with the clash of swords or the march of an invading army. It came softly like a storm gathering on the horizon unseen until it was too late. For centuries, the city had ruled the heartland of America, its mounds rising like mountains of faith and power. But now the wind had changed. At first it was the harvest. The fertile land that had once yielded abundance began to fail. The corn, the lifeblood of Cahokia, grew smaller, the stalks brittle under the sun. The rains, once steady and dependable, began to shift sometimes, not coming at all, sometimes flooding the fields until they drowned. The delicate balance between people and nature had been broken. With the harvests failing, hunger crept in. Food became scarce and trade faltered. The bustling markets that once overflowed with fish shells and woven goods grew quiet. Neighbors began to turn against one another. Families who had once shared their bounty now hoarded what little they had. Starvation, that cruel and patient enemy, began to whisper through the streets. The priests, those who had long promised divine favor, found their words losing power. Their ceremonies grew louder, their offerings more. Desperate, but still the rains did not come. The people began to ask the questions that had long been forbidden. Had the gods abandoned them, or had their leaders failed the gods? It was then that the city's unity began to crumble. The great wooden palisades that once protected Cahokia now stood as symbols of division. Factions formed, some loyal to the priests, others to the common people. Rumors spread of rebellion. In the outlying villages of fires, lit in the night of idols destroyed in anger. Archaeologists centuries later would find evidence of this unrest: burned homes, shattered pottery, signs of violence. It seemed that Cahokia's fall was not just environmental, but deeply human. A collapse from within. And yet, even as the city began to crumble, its rulers clung to ceremony. They built new mounds, though fewer came to worship. They held great feasts, though the food was scarce. It was as if they were trying to remind themselves and the gods that Cahokia still mattered, that the dream was not yet over. But dreams fade when the world stops believing in them. For centuries, Cahokia slept beneath the earth, silent, hidden, forgotten. The mighty mounds that once reached toward the May heavens became soft hills covered with grass and trees. Farmers plowed their fields over the bones of ancient temples, unaware that beneath their feet lay the remains of one of North America's greatest cities. The Mississippi River, eternal and patient, flowed on as if keeping the secret. Seasons came and went. Empires rose and fell across the ocean, and still Cahokia waited. It wasn't until the 19th century that the world began to rediscover the city. When settlers first arrived in the American Midwest, they were stunned by the sight of massive earthen hills scattered across the landscape. They couldn't believe that such structures were built by the ancestors of the native peoples they saw around them. Many assumed they were the work of a lost race, perhaps even survivors of Atlantis or a vanished European colony. But the truth, as always, was far more extraordinary. These mounds were not the work of outsiders. They were built by the hands of ancient Americans themselves, men and women who carried baskets of earth one after another for generations. People who dreamed, who believed, who built a civilization of staggering complexity long before the first Europeans set foot on these shores. Archaeologists began to dig, and with every layer of soil, the story of Cahokia began to breathe again. They uncovered vast plazas, temples aligned with the sun, and remains of wooden wood henges that marked solstices and equinoxes. They found jewelry made from shells brought from the Gulf of Mexico, copper from the Great Lakes, and obsidian from the Rockies. Cahokia had been a hub of trade, connecting distant peoples across an entire continent. But the discoveries also revealed something deeper, a story of ambition, belief, and fragility. The bones of the young, women in the great burial mound sacrificed for reasons lost to time. The charred remains of homes, evidence of civil unrest. The changing layers of soil that spoke of floods, droughts, and famine. Each artifact told a piece of a grand, tragic puzzle. Cahokia's story was not one of simple failure. It was the story of humanity itself. A people who reached for greatness, who built monuments to faith and power, who flourished and fell, leaving behind lessons written, not in books, but in earth. Today, Monk's Mound still stands, the largest ancient structure north of Mexico. If you stand upon its summit at sunrise, you can see the land stretch endlessly in all directions. The wind whispers through the grass, and for a moment, if you close your eyes, you can almost hear it. The distant rhythm of drums, the laughter of children, the murmur of traders in the marketplace, the chants rising from the temple below. Cahokia may be gone, but its spirit lingers in the soil, in the rivers, in the stories passed down through the ages. It is a reminder that history is not just written by those who conquer, but also by those who build, who dream, and who endure. The people of Cahokia were not forgotten. They became part of the great tapestry of Native America. Their legacy flowed through the Mississippi, carried by time, woven into the heritage of the nations that came after them. In the end, Cahokia teaches us something eternal, that civilization is not just about cities and monuments, but about connection to the earth, to one another, to the sacred rhythm of life itself. And though their city has fallen silent, the story of the Cahokians still speaks. Across the centuries, across the winds of the prairie, their voices whisper to us, remember that greatness does not only belong to those who wrote the histories, but also to those who built their dreams into the earth and dared to touch the sky. As the sun sets over the mounds of Cahokia, the shadows stretch long across the land, a silent tribute to a civilization that once pulsed with life. The wind carries whispers of the past, faint echoes of voices that once prayed, traded, dreamed, and built beneath this very sky. Cahokia's story is not just the tale of an ancient city, it is the story of us all, of humanity's endless rise and fall of dreams, born from earth and lost to time. It reminds us that greatness is not eternal, and even the mightiest societies can fade when balanced with nature and faith is broken. Yet in their silence, the Cahokians left us something enduring, a lesson carved into the land itself. If you stand there today, atop Monk's Mound, the wind feels different. It hums softly, like a memory too old to speak. And you realize the people of Cahokia are not gone. They live on in the soil, in the rivers, in the heartbeat of this land. Their story reminds us that history is never truly lost, only waiting to be remembered. So listen closely. The earth still tells their story,